provide you with an overview and some context in terms of some of the important aspects around climate change in this government's strategy. I firstly also want to acknowledge all of you in this room. The role that you play in terms of the FSC community is significant. The contributions that all of you make in your respective roles to what is a very important sector is also acknowledged, and it is great to see such a large crowd here today to talk about a very important topic. Since 2021, the financial sector has had to adapt and become more educated and resourced to ensure that it complies with climate-related disclosures. And I know that that process has been significant, and we continue to be on a pathway as a country in terms of taking the lead in many areas in regards to that. And hopefully we're starting to see some of that benefit. The other reality is that private capital and investment play a critical role in the way in which we're going to achieve our climate targets, but also importantly prepare for its future impacts. And so those efforts are also acknowledged in regards to the sector that you are part of. Today I'm going to outline our government's climate strategy. I'm also then going to talk about the critical role that private capital and investment plays, particularly in our climate change response. As some of you know, I've worked for nearly 20 years in the global banking and financial markets, primarily in London, before coming back to New Zealand and going into Parliament. I think if I asked my wife, she would much prefer if I was still sitting in your seats within the FSC sector, but I am thoroughly enjoying my new role and the responsibilities that that brings, because there is huge opportunity for change and transformational change at a New Zealand Inc. level, and that's what is critical. With both the climate change portfolio and revenue portfolio, I do bring that experience to that table. And climate change under this coalition government is an economic issue. The future successes of New Zealand and the resilience of our economy will be determined by how we respond and prepare to the impacts of climate change and ensure that we transition to a low emissions economy. The government's commitment to climate change is very clear. We have 9 public sector targets, and climate change is one of those. We also have a clear articulation around the 2040 vision, and the coalition government is committed to ensuring that we meet our climate change targets and that we responsibly invest to support New Zealand's transition to a low emissions and climate resilient future. We have reinstated public service targets to focus on better results for New Zealanders, and that's across a wide range of spectrums from health, education, law and order, housing, and also importantly the environment. The 9th public service target is our commitment to be on track to meet New Zealand's net zero commitment by 2050, but also more importantly, being this the critical decade, to ensure that we meet our domestic emissions reduction budgets, both first and second budgets, which take us through to 2030. So the Prime Minister has placed the accountability of meeting those targets on me, and relevant ministers such as the Minister of Agriculture, Transport, Energy have responsibility for delivering those. But I chair a ministerial leadership group, including the Prime Minister, to ensure that we have an action plan and we are delivering and progressing that plan. So this is a serious area of business for us, and we are focused on it. The Prime Minister has also doubled down in terms of our commitment around climate change when he talked about our vision for 2040. He talks about 3 pillars of the economy, or 3 pillars of our society. One is around economy, one is around social investment, and the 3rd pillar around climate change. So again, showing the importance of where this sits. And we need to have a comprehensive result and response in play by 2040. We also need a long-term mindset. Climate change is one of the few portfolios that actually has an intergenerational, 20, 30, 50, 100 years out is the way in which we look at the planning required in this space, and that is also equally important. So let's talk about our climate strategy. It's got 5 key areas. Most strategies have 5 pillars, don't they? So we've done that as well, and it is important around that. But the climate change strategy ensures that we not only meet the impacts and reduce the impacts of climate change, but also prepare for its future effects. The 5 areas include resilient infrastructure and well-prepared communities. 2, clean energy being abundant and affordable. 3, nature-based solutions. to address climate change, which is a very much an emerging area, but an acknowledgement that there is a clear linkage between nature, biodiversity and climate. Fourthly, a world-leading climate innovation supposed to boost the economy. And fifth, credible markets to support the climate transition. So as we develop to meet our climate targets, you'll need and you will see actions falling off each of those pillars in those 5 priority areas. I'll take you through those areas in a little bit more detail. So resilient infrastructure and well-prepared communities. You hear a lot about emissions reduction or mitigation. The other aspect is around adaptation or preparing resilient infrastructure to deal with the impacts and the future impacts. And that's critically important because here at home, last February with the impact of the floods, many of you may have been impacted by that. The reality is we are having to deal with the impacts of climate change, and that is a significant fiscal cost at a broader economic level. It also has considerations around the insurance market and other aspects around that. So last month, I was pleased to be able to announce that we've reached a bipartisan consensus to form a select committee under the FEC Select Committee, Finance and Expenditure, to conduct an inquiry on adaptation and ensure that we have the fundamental elements to be able to put in place an adaptation framework legislation bill into the House in early part of 2025. That is critical. That will be one of the first countries in the world to have a comprehensive framework on how to deal with climate adaptation. And importantly, we have a bipartisan agreement around that. In my job, that can't be underestimated. It's not always the case. But from my perspective, government does need to lead in this space to get all the parties around the table, and we need an enduring framework. We can't afford for such a big topic area that impacts intergenerationally to flip-flop due to the politics in Wellington. And so I was really proud to be able to get that consistency and that agreement across. I live on the north shore of Auckland. Many houses in my community were impacted last February, and are still, many residents in my community are still not actually back into their homes because of the damage that was resulted. And that's not that far away from here. So this is a reality for many of us up here. We know what we need to expect around these future events, but we also, importantly, from a capital flow, need to understand how these costs will be shared. And we need to also make sure that the information available in the market is freely available so that consumers have, in effect, a concept of buyer beware when they're making investment decision making. We also want to make sure that properties, roads, water systems, other infrastructure is keeping up with the fact that our communities are growing significantly, particularly in urban areas. We need to make sure that they are resilient in regards to the impacts of weather events. And that's why we need that long-term framework and approach. The inquiry will also provide recommendations and principles on the framework, and that'll report back to me on the 5th of September. That'll then give us around 3 to 4 months to consolidate and prepare some considerations around legislation and put that through the House. I've been very clear with our officials that we cannot put our head in the sand to this issue. Who pays is a really significant question. It is a very difficult and complex and challenging question. It's also politically not an area that generally political people want to get into because of the complexity. But I think it is required at a New Zealand Inc. level that we don't kick this for touch any longer. We need to move forward from where we are. There is an uncoordinated and disorganised situation, even in terms of roles and responsibilities between the Crown, local government, iwi Māori, private sector, our communities, and we need a framework to pull that all together. So I'm hopeful that this inquiry will do what it needs to do. The public submissions are still open, so if you want to make a submission, feel free. You've got until the 16th of June, and then we'll see where we go in regards to following that. The second aspect is around clean energy, and New Zealand is blessed with renewables. We should have abundant clean energy that is affordable. And so boosting the energy sector to make clean energy that is abundant and affordable is one of our focus areas. Here in New Zealand, a key driver of emissions, which is about 40% of our total emissions comes from energy, and transport is around 18% of that. So the way in which we decarbonise and reduce emissions in transport particularly is going to be through electrification for light vehicle fleet, and most probably hydrogen for heavy fleet vehicles. If we can produce that energy here in New Zealand, we don't need to import that fossil fuel from offshore, and that has a significant impact, not only in terms of fiscals, in terms of balance of payments, but also energy security. And one can't underestimate the importance of energy security and its linkage to food security in the current world of geopolitical instability, particularly in the Southeast Asia region. And so this has a number of aspects. It's also a cost of living consideration. The reality is that a renewable energy and even solar off the roof, take into account the capital costs, is below the price at which we're producing it out of the grid at the moment. And so there is a number of considerations around investment opportunity there. We're already at about 90% renewables, but we want to double that. So we produce around 8 gigawatts of electricity energy in the country. We want to take that to 16 in the next 25 years. And that's a pretty significant commitment, but we believe it is possible, and that will put us at a competitive advantage over many other countries because of the abundance of energy, and energy powers our economy. And that will give us options. So wind, solar, geothermal are all on the play. We've got a fast-track approvals process that we want to make this a reality. 1 year consenting for all of those types of projects, and take into account the challenges of how long it takes to get stuff done in this country. We really need to double down and accelerate the speed at which we're putting in renewables into New Zealand to enable to support our economy. And obviously those renewable energy aspects will also lead through to high emission or reduce high emission fuels. So green methanol, green hydrogen are all off-takes from that production. Nature-based solutions is a new component that we've brought in. I've heard loud and clear from the sector that we need to be considering biodiversity and now nature in conjunction with climate. They are related, everything is connected, and so we can't discuss one without the other. We've made a commitment that that is one of our pillars in terms of our climate strategy, and I think that is recognition of, again, leadership at a country level, that we are stepping forward and acknowledging that. But for many New Zealanders, protecting the climate or actually protecting nature actually feels a more natural affinity than protecting the climate, because they can understand and see and feel that. And it's more tangible for many New Zealanders. So that makes it easier also for us to mobilise people in this aspect. The biodiversity aspect will ensure that we can adapt and thrive to a damaging climate, and by also restoring habitats, ecosystems, and also both in an urban setting, considering how we can protect homes and communities using innovative aspects of community design. The emissions trading scheme is a key area of focus here in New Zealand, so therefore having credible markets to support the climate transition is critical. Pricing carbon is the most effective mechanism in order to reduce emissions. That is international evidence and international statement around and positioning around that, and New Zealand's lucky to have the second oldest or most mature carbon market in the world after the EU. So we are experienced in this space. Emissions trading is a key tool, and we need to ensure that there is confidence within the market. The confidence is driven by government policy and the way in which government policy is set, and the stability of that government policy. And so I've been very clear that this government will ensure that we make no significant changes to the ETS, while also looking for areas to improve. Forestry is a key element of our emissions reduction here in New Zealand. It will remain a key part of the emissions trading scheme in New Zealand, and it also supports our rural communities as well. We do have concerns about trees and exotics going onto productive farmland. We've heard that, and we are looking to make some changes around land use classes, but not within the ETS, outside in terms of the regulatory RMA model, which is where it's more appropriate. So that's some of the changes that we're working through. We made some big announcements or some significant announcements yesterday. You might have heard of that on the news this morning, so that agriculture will not be staying within the ETS. If we'd done nothing, it would have been come into the ETS on the 1st of January next year, and straight away agriculture would have been subject to emissions pricing. There is no solution to agricultural methane on the ground at scale in New Zealand today. And so what we've said is that we will introduce pricing by 2030, but we want to work with the industry, not against it, in the next 77 months between now and 2030 to put in place on-farm measurement, on-farm measuring and monitoring, mandatory reporting, having a pricing panel in place, and then ensure that we've got a pricing mechanism that is in place by 2030, aligned with the innovation and research and development funding that we're putting in around emission reduction for agriculture. So that's pretty significant, and again, we have got a huge reliance on our primary sector for our economy. 80% of our exports are primary sector. And so we need to make sure that we are working with that sector, not against it, in terms of the stability and the resilience of our broader economy. I know I'm over time, so I'm going to sort of cut to the chase and then we'll get into the panel. But I just want to acknowledge that climate change presents both a risk and an opportunity in terms of a capital sense and a funding sense. And so from the financial services sector, it is a significant opportunity. You're seeing significant capital flows flowing in regards to investments in renewables around the world. China is building more renewables this year than every other country in the world combined. That is the scale of investment. For every $3 of renewable energy being spent or built in the US, there's $1 of old energy. So the model and the levelling up is changing significantly. And so the opportunity in terms of being involved around that is also important. We're doing some work around the taxonomy as well, which I won't get into detail, but just a headline around that. And I'm working with the Australian Treasurer and the Australian Climate Change Minister, along with Minister Willis. We're over there in about 6 weeks to undertake a 2+2, which is in effect ministers from both sides of the Tasman working on where we can look at joint opportunities. Harmonisation is a key area of focus, and you'll see that flowing through and actually much of the stuff that you're doing as well, and that will be important. So in summary, climate change is a significant priority. We now have an overarching climate strategy that has 5 key pillars, which I've outlined you today. They reflect the pathways that we will undertake to achieve our climate goals. We are absolutely committed to achieving those, and we'll do what is required to do that while working with industry and with our economy and sector to achieve that. We're going to be publishing an emissions reduction plan, which will be coming out for consultation in July, so 6 weeks away. That will outline the exact pathways and actions that we will take in the next 5 years to hit those targets. We will consult and get feedback and welcome that feedback, and that plan will be finalised in December, and then we simply move to how are we progressing against that plan and are we executing that plan. That plan will add up. It will provide transparency because we did not inherit a viable plan to hit our targets, and so we're having to make sure we have that in play. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Heidi, and now looking forward to participating in the panel as well. So thank you very much and have a great day.